Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Lagos, a man named Kayode sat behind the wheel of his car, his mind racing. My wife insisted we drive separately, he thought to himself. Then his daughter Evelyn broke the silence. It's a trap, Daddy. She set you up. They were about halfway to the hotel on the island when Evelyn's demeanor changed. She became quiet, fidgeting with the hem of her dress and staring out the window at the passing traffic. Kayode could see her reflection in the passenger window, and she looked troubled. Everything okay, my dear? She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and hesitant. Daddy, can I tell you something? Of course, you can tell me anything. Another long pause, then in a rush of words that hit him like a physical blow, It's a trap, Daddy. She set you up. Kayode slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the side of the road so abruptly that the Danfo bus behind them honked angrily. His heart was pounding as he turned to look at his daughter. Evelyn, what did you just say? Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. Mummy, she's planning something bad for tonight. I heard her talking on the phone. This is the story of Kayode, a story about love, betrayal, and discovering that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones planning your destruction. 12 years ago, Kayode married Simi. She was everything he thought he wanted in a wife, beautiful, charming, and from a family that his parents absolutely adored. Their families had been close for years, and when Simi and Kayode started dating, everyone said they were perfect for each other. He was young, naive, and ready to settle down. She was his first love, his first everything. Looking back, Kayode realized he was so eager to build a life that he never really took the time to truly know the woman he was marrying. But at 25, he thought love was enough to overcome anything. Their early years were good, or at least he thought they were. Simi seemed happy, supportive, and when Evelyn was born 2 years into their marriage, Kayode felt like his life was complete. He had a beautiful wife, a healthy daughter, and dreams of building something meaningful. He threw himself into being the best husband and father he could be. He worked 2 jobs to make sure Simi could stay home with Evelyn during her early years. When she mentioned wanting to redecorate their house in Surulere, he picked up weekend construction work to pay for it. When she dreamed about taking a vacation to Dubai, he saved every extra naira for 6 months to make it happen. He remembered one particular instance that showed just how far he was willing to go for her happiness. Simi had always wanted to learn photography, so he secretly contacted every studio in Lagos until he found one that offered private lessons. He paid for a full year of sessions up front, money they honestly couldn't afford at the time, to see that smile on her face when she opened the gift on her birthday. Another time, when Evelyn was about 5, Simi mentioned how she missed her grandmother's ring that had been passed down. She'd lost it somewhere in the house during one of her cleaning sprees. Kayode spent 3 entire weekends going through every inch of their home, checking under furniture, in old boxes, even going through the vacuum cleaner bags. He never found that ring, but he saw how much it meant to her to know he cared enough to look. These weren't grand gestures to him. They were just what you do for someone you love. He wanted Simi to know that her happiness mattered to him, that he was willing to work hard and sacrifice to give her the life she deserved. As the years went by, Kayode continued climbing the corporate ladder. He was determined to provide security for his family. Every promotion meant longer hours, more responsibility, but also more financial stability. Simi seemed proud of his success, often bragging to her friends about his accomplishments. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. Kayode received the promotion he had been working toward for years, regional manager at Balogun and Associates, a prestigious consulting firm on the island. The salary was everything he dreamed of, but it came with significant demands. Suddenly, he was traveling more, working late nights, and handling high-stakes projects. Instead of complaining, he saw this as his opportunity to finally give his family everything they deserved. With his new position, he started developing a business plan for his own consulting firm. He spent his evenings after work researching, networking, and building connections in the industry. 18 months ago, he finally took the leap. He used their savings and took out a business loan to start Kayode Consulting Solutions. The early days were brutal. He was essentially working two full-time jobs, managing his responsibilities at Balagan and Associates while building his own client base. But the hard work paid off. Within 8 months, his business was thriving beyond his wildest expectations. They landed several major contracts, including one with a fintech startup that was preparing for a massive expansion. The revenue was flowing in faster than he'd ever imagined possible. He thought Simi would be thrilled. They could finally afford the house in Lekki she'd always wanted, the car she'd been eyeing, the family vacations they'd been putting off. He imagined them growing closer as a family now that financial stress was no longer hanging over them. Instead, something strange started happening. The more successful his business became, the more distant Simi grew. It started small. She'd be scrolling through her phone during dinner, barely responding when Evelyn or Kayode tried to start a conversation. When he'd come home excited about landing a new client or closing a big deal, she'd give him a distracted, "That's nice, darling," without even looking up from whatever was on her screen. Then she started going out more. "I need to clear my head," she'd say, grabbing her purse and keys. "I'll be back later." These outings became more frequent, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. When he'd ask where she went, she'd give vague answers about driving around the mainland or stopping by the mall. He tried to be understanding. Maybe she was struggling with him being away so much during the business launch phase. Maybe she needed time to adjust to their changing circumstances. He suggested they take a weekend trip together, just the two of them, but she said she wasn't ready for that kind of commitment with his schedule being so unpredictable. The phone calls were what really started to worry him. Simi had always been social, but suddenly she was getting calls at all hours. She'd step outside to take them or go into another room and speak in hushed tones. When he'd ask about it, she'd say it was her sister Folake or her friend Kioma going through some drama. But something felt off. The way she'd quickly end calls when he walked into a room, the way she'd angle her phone screen away from him when she was texting, the secretive smile she'd sometimes get while typing messages. Kayode didn't want to be that husband who accused his wife of things without evidence. But the signs were becoming harder to ignore. Still, he told himself he was being paranoid. Simi and he had built a life together. They had Evelyn. They'd weathered challenges before. 6 months ago, things took another turn. Simi started mentioning her uncle Kola more frequently. She'd known him her whole life, she explained, but they'd recently reconnected. He was going through a difficult time and needed family support. Kayode met Kola at a family barbecue, and he seemed like a decent enough guy. Mid-30s, wearing a crisp senator suit, articulate. He was polite to Kayode, played with Evelyn, and seemed to fit right in with Simi's extended family. Kayode didn't think much about him at first, but then he started noticing Kola's car parked in their driveway when he'd come home from work trips. When he'd ask about it, Simi would explain that Kola had been helping with some household projects, or had stopped by to check on her while Kayode was away. "He's just being a good uncle," she'd say. "You know how our people are. We look out for each other." Kayode wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. His business had grown to the point where they were ready for a major launch event, a party to introduce Kayode Consulting Solutions to potential investors and strategic partners. This was the culmination of everything he'd been working toward. The morning of the event, he was buzzing with nervous energy. He'd been preparing his presentation for weeks, double-checking every detail to make sure everything would be perfect. This was his chance to show investors what Kayode Consulting Solutions could become with the right backing. "I'm so proud of you," Simi said over breakfast of yam and egg sauce, and for a moment she seemed like the supportive wife he'd fallen in love with years ago. "This is going to be amazing." But then, as they were getting ready to leave, she made an unexpected suggestion. "I think we should drive separately tonight," she said, adjusting her gel in the mirror. Kayode paused in the middle of straightening his agbada. "Separately? Why?" "I have a few errands to run before the party. You know how I am. I'll want to stop by the store, maybe get my nails touched up. I don't want to make you late for your own event." It seemed reasonable enough, but something about her tone bothered him. There was an insistence in her voice that didn't match the casualness of her explanation. "Simi, this is a big night for us." I'd like us to arrive together. The errands can wait. She turned to face him then, and he saw a flash of something in her eyes. Irritation, maybe even anger, but it was gone so quickly he wondered if he had imagined it. Simi, please. I promise I'll be there on time. I just need to handle a few things first. It's better this way. Before he could argue further, she added, Besides, Evelyn should ride with you. This is your night, and she should be there to see her daddy in his moment of glory. The way she said it felt wrong somehow, but he couldn't put his finger on why. And she was right about one thing. He wanted Evelyn there to see what they'd built together as a family. Fine, he said, though the word felt heavy in his mouth. But please don't be late. This presentation is important. I'll be there, she said, kissing his cheek. I wouldn't miss it for the world. An hour later, Evelyn and Coyote were in his car, heading toward the hotel on Victoria Island. His daughter was dressed in her best party dress, which Simi had insisted on buying for the occasion. She was excited, chattering about the party and asking questions about his business. Daddy, are you nervous? She asked as they stopped at a traffic light. A little, he admitted. This is a big night. A lot of important people will be there. You'll do great, Evelyn said with the confidence that only a 10-year-old can have in her father. Her faith in him was both comforting and humbling. Whatever happened with Simi, he knew he had to make sure Evelyn felt secure and loved. She was the most important thing in his life. They were about halfway to the hotel when Evelyn's demeanor changed. She became quiet, fidgeting with her seatbelt and staring out the window. Coyote could see her reflection in the passenger window, and she looked troubled. Everything okay, my dear? She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and hesitant. Daddy, can I tell you something? Of course, you can tell me anything. Another long pause, then in a rush of words that hit him like a physical blow. It's a trap, Daddy. She set you up. Coyote slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the side of the road so abruptly that the yellow bus behind them honked angrily. His heart was pounding as he turned to look at his daughter. Evelyn, what did you just say? Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. Mummy, she's planning something bad for tonight. I heard her talking on the phone. The world seemed to tilt around him. What exactly did you hear? Evelyn looked down at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard her talking in the kitchen. She was talking to Uncle Cola, but she wasn't talking to him like an uncle. What do you mean? She was talking to him like she used to talk to you before you started working so much. Like she loves him instead of you. His chest felt tight, like he couldn't breathe properly, but he forced himself to stay calm for Evelyn's sake. What else did you hear? She said something about tonight, about the party. She said, by the time he gets to the party, it'll be too late. I've sent you the forged records, documents and all. Just play it on the big projector so his investors… Evelyn's voice trailed off. She said, what about forged documents? I don't know what all the words meant, Daddy, but she sounded happy, like she was excited about something bad happening to you. And Uncle Cola, he was laughing. Coyote sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what his 10-year-old daughter was telling him. Forged documents, the projector at the party venue, his investors. Evelyn, this is very important. How many times have you seen Uncle Cola at our house? Lots of times. He comes over when you're not home. Mummy told me not to tell you because she said you'd be jealous of her having a friend, but they don't act like friends. They act like you and Mummy used to act. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture he didn't want to see. His wife and her supposed uncle. The distance between them, the secret phone calls, and now some plan involving forged documents in his business presentation. Daddy, are you mad at me? Evelyn asked, her voice breaking. He reached over and pulled her into a hug. No, my darling, I'm not mad at you at all. You did the right thing by telling me you might have just saved us both from something terrible. But even as he comforted his daughter, his mind was racing. What kind of forged documents could Simi have access to? What was she planning to show his investors? And why? Even if she was having an affair with Cola, why would she want to destroy the business that was finally giving their family financial security? Unless destroying him was the point. He pulled out his phone and called Femi, his business partner and closest friend. Femi, are you at the venue? The investors are starting to arrive. Femi, I need you to check something for me. Is the presentation laptop secure? Has anyone else had access to it? What do you mean? It's been locked in the office all day. Why? I think someone might be planning to sabotage tonight's presentation. Can you double-check all the files? Make sure nothing's been altered or added. There was a pause. Coyote, what's going on? You're scaring me. Just check it, please. And Femi, if Simi shows up before me, don't let her near any of the equipment. I'll explain everything when I get there. Okay, but I'll be there in 20 minutes. Just be careful. He hung up and looked at Evelyn. We're still going to the party, Evelyn, but I need you to stay close to me tonight, okay? No matter what happens. She nodded, though he could see she was still scared and confused. As they drove toward the hotel, he tried to piece together what Simi might be planning. If she had somehow gotten hold of business documents and forged them, what would be her goal? To make him look like a fraud in front of his investors? To destroy his reputation? But why? The hotel parking lot was full when they arrived. Through the large windows, he could see people mingling in the ballroom, networking, and enjoying the cocktail hour that preceded his presentation. These weren't just random guests. These were investors who could take Coyote Consulting Solutions to the next level. Business leaders he'd been cultivating relationships with for months. If Simi's plan was to humiliate him in front of them, the damage to his reputation could be irreparable. Femi met him at the entrance, his face grim. We have a problem, he said quietly, leading Coyote away from the crowd. I found files on the presentation laptop that weren't there this morning. Financial records that make it look like you've been embezzling from client accounts. That's impossible. I know it's impossible, but the documents look real professional. If someone had projected these during your presentation, I would have looked like a criminal in front of everyone who matters in this industry. Femi nodded. Coyote, how could someone have accessed our systems? These files are sophisticated forgeries. This isn't something someone did in their spare time. Coyote thought about Simi's behavior over the past few months. The secretive phone calls, the time she spent on her computer when she thought he wasn't paying attention, the way she'd ask casual questions about his business operations. My wife, he said quietly. I think my wife has been planning this. Simi, Coyote. Why would she do something like that? Before he could answer, Evelyn tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, there's Uncle Cola. He looked where she was pointing and saw Cola near the bar, dressed in an expensive suit and talking to several of his investors. He looked comfortable, confident, like he belonged at his business launch party. But as Coyote watched him, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. He kept checking his watch and glancing toward the entrance like he was waiting for something or someone. That's when Coyote realized the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about sabotaging his presentation. Simi and Cola were planning to frame him for embezzlement in front of a room full of industry leaders and potential investors. His reputation would be destroyed. His business would collapse. And then what? Would they disappear together with whatever money they could steal from the business accounts? But they'd made one critical mistake. They hadn't counted on Evelyn overhearing their conversation. They hadn't expected him to discover their plan before it was too late. Femi, Coyote said, I need you to call Inspector Adebayo from the Financial Crimes Unit. Tell him we have evidence of attempted fraud and embezzlement. Are you sure about this, Coyote? Once we involve the police, I'm sure. And Femi, I need you to make sure that projector is set to record everything. I have a feeling we're going to want evidence of what happens tonight. As Femi walked away to make the call, Coyote knelt down to Evelyn's level. Evelyn, I need you to do something very important for me. I need you to stay with Uncle Bayo tonight. Don't leave his side no matter what happens. Can you do that? Evelyn nodded solemnly. Bayo was Femi's older brother and someone Coyote trusted completely with his daughter's safety. Is something bad going to happen to Mummy? Evelyn asked. He touched her face gently. I don't know, my dear, but I promise you no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. You did the right thing by telling me the truth. Remember that. As if summoned by their conversation, Simi walked through the ballroom entrance. She looked stunning, her hair perfectly styled, wearing the expensive lace dress he'd bought her for their anniversary last year. She moved through the crowd with confidence, smiling and greeting people like the perfect supportive wife. But now Coyote could see what he'd been blind to before. The way her eyes constantly scanned the room, locating Cola, the subtle nod they exchanged across the crowded space, the satisfied smile that played at the corners of her mouth. She was here for the show. She wanted to watch him be destroyed. He watched as she made her way over to the technical setup where the laptop and projector were positioned for his presentation, but Femi was already there, standing guard and deflecting her casual questions about the equipment. Inspector Adebayo arrived 15 minutes later, along with his partner, Sergeant Cole. Coyote had worked with them before on a case involving financial fraud at one of his client companies, and they knew him to be reliable and honest. "Coyote," Inspector Adebayo said quietly, "Femi filled us in on the situation. Do you have any actual evidence besides your daughter's testimony?" "Check the laptop. Someone uploaded forged financial documents designed to make me look like I've been stealing from clients. The digital footprint should tell you when and how those files were added." Sergeant Cole was already examining the computer with a portable forensics device. After a few minutes, he looked up and nodded to his partner. The files were uploaded remotely yesterday night from an IP address registered to Coyote's home internet connection, but the digital signature shows they were created using software licensed to Acola Johnson. Everything was falling into place. Simi had used their home computer to upload the files, but Cola had created them using his own software. They'd left a clear digital trail pointing directly to both of them. "There's more," Sergeant Cole continued. "These aren't just forged documents. They're copies of real financial records that have been altered. Someone with inside access to the business accounts would have needed to provide the original templates." Coyote felt sick. Simi had access to their home computer where he sometimes worked on business documents. She had been watching, learning, gathering information for months while pretending to be the supportive wife. "What do you want us to do?" Inspector Adebayo asked. Coyote looked across the room at his wife, still playing her part perfectly, chatting with investors and accepting their compliments about how successful a husband she had. "I want to give my presentation as planned," he said, "but I want you to be ready to make arrests the moment they try to execute their plan." The next hour was surreal. Coyote moved through the crowd, making small talk with investors and partners, accepting congratulations on the business's success, all while knowing that his wife and her lover were planning to destroy everything he'd worked for. Evelyn stayed close to Bayo, but he could see her watching him with worried eyes. He smiled and waved at her occasionally, trying to project calm he didn't feel. At 8 o'clock, Femi called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate the launch of Coyote Consulting Solutions. Coyote has built something remarkable here, and we're excited to show you the opportunities ahead. Please, Coyote, the floor is yours." Coyote walked to the front of the room, his heart pounding. The projector screen behind him was blank, waiting for his presentation to begin. In the crowd, he could see Simi watching with anticipation. Cola was positioned near the technical equipment, ready to make his move. "Thank you all for being here," Coyote began. 18 months ago, I had a dream of creating a consulting firm that would... He started with his planned presentation, clicking through slides about market opportunities and growth projections. But he was watching Simi and Cola, waiting for them to make their move. It came during the financial overview section. As he was explaining their revenue growth, he saw Cola move toward the laptop. But instead of uploading the forged documents as they'd planned, he found Femi blocking his access. "Excuse me," Cola said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I think there might be a technical issue with the presentation. Some concerning financial documents just appeared on the system." This was it. This was their moment. But instead of the forged embezzlement records they expected to display, something else appeared on the screen behind Coyote. Security camera footage from their home showing Simi and Cola together in ways that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The room fell silent. Coyote turned to look at the screen, pretending to be as shocked as everyone else. "What? What is this?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. More footage played, Simi and Kola at the kitchen table going over documents and laughing. Audio of their phone conversation that Evelyn had overheard, including Simi's voice clearly saying, "By the time he gets to the party, it'll be too late." The room erupted in murmurs and shocked whispers. Investors looked back and forth between Coyote, the screen, and Simi, trying to understand what they were seeing. Simi's face had gone white. She was staring at the screen in horror, then at Kola, then at Coyote. For the first time in months, he saw real emotion in her eyes, but it was panic, not remorse. "Coyote," she started to say, stepping forward, "I can explain." "Ladies and gentlemen," Inspector Adebayo announced, showing his badge as he moved through the crowd, "we need everyone to remain calm. We're conducting an arrest related to attempted fraud and embezzlement." "This is insane, Kola. I was helping you catch her. She's the criminal." But even as he protested his innocence, Sergeant Cole was reading them both their rights. The evidence was overwhelming. The digital trail, the security footage, the testimony they'd prepared. As the police led them away, Simi looked back at Coyote with an expression he'd never seen before. It wasn't love or regret or even anger. It was pure calculation, like she was already planning her next move. "You don't understand," she called out as they reached the door. "He threatened me. He said he would hurt Evelyn if I didn't help him." It was a desperate lie, and everyone in the room could see it. The security footage had shown her as an eager participant, not a victim. After the police left with his wife and her accomplice, Coyote found himself standing in front of a room of stunned investors and colleagues. His business launch party had turned into something from a Nollywood movie. "I apologize for the disruption," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "As you can see, I've recently discovered that someone very close to me was attempting to sabotage this business and frame me for crimes I didn't commit. I want to assure you all that Coyote Consulting Solutions operates with complete integrity, and we welcome any investigation into our business practices." To his surprise, the response was supportive. Several investors approached him afterwards, expressing their admiration for how he handled the situation and their continued confidence in the business. "Frankly," said Chief Mrs. Adebayo, one of the major investors, "the way you uncovered and stopped this fraud attempt shows exactly the kind of analytical thinking and attention to detail we want in a consulting partner." The business not only survived the scandal, it thrived. The story of how he caught his wife attempting to frame him actually enhanced his reputation in the industry. Clients saw it as proof of his investigative abilities and ethical standards. But the personal cost was devastating. Going home to an empty house, explaining to Evelyn why her mother wouldn't be coming home, dealing with the media attention, it all took its toll. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Simi and Kola both tried to blame each other, each claiming they'd been manipulated by the other. But the evidence was clear. They had been planning this together, motivated by greed and their affair. During the investigation, more disturbing details emerged. They hadn't just planned to frame him for embezzlement. They had been slowly draining money from business accounts for months, planning to disappear together after his reputation was destroyed. The forged documents were meant to make it look like he was the one stealing, covering their tracks while they escaped with over 100 million naira. Simi was sentenced to 5 years for fraud and conspiracy. Kola got 7 years as the court determined he'd been the mastermind behind the technical aspects of the scheme. 6 months after the trial ended, Coyote made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He sold the house where Simi and he had built their life together and moved to Abuja. The memories were too painful, and he wanted a fresh start for Evelyn and himself. They settled in a quieter neighborhood where he could run his consulting business remotely while giving Evelyn a chance to heal from the trauma of her mother's betrayal. She'd been seeing a counselor, and while she was resilient, he knew the experience had affected her deeply. It was in Abuja that he met Tiwa. He was at a cafe in Wuse, working on a client proposal, when he looked up and saw the most beautiful woman he had ever encountered. She had warm brown eyes, natural hair braided in a simple style, and a smile that seemed to light up the entire room as she chatted with the waiter. But it wasn't just her beauty that caught his attention. There was something about her presence, her energy, that made him feel instantly drawn to her. It was different from anything he had experienced before. Not the desperate need to settle down that had driven him towards Simi, but a genuine deep attraction to another person. He watched her order her coffee and find a table near the window. She pulled out a book and started reading, occasionally looking up to people watch or smile at something in the text. Everything about her seemed genuine, unguarded. He wanted to approach her, but he hesitated. It had been less than a year since his divorce was finalized, and he wasn't sure he was ready to put himself out there again, but something about Tiwa, he'd heard the waiter use her name, made him want to try. He gathered his courage and walked over to her table. "Excuse me, I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I couldn't help noticing your book. Is that the new Chimamanda Adichie novel?" She looked up at him, and for a moment he thought he saw recognition flash across her features. But then her expression changed to something like panic. Yes, it is," she said, closing the book and starting to gather her things. "It's very good. I've been meaning to read it. Would you recommend?" But she was already standing up, clearly trying to escape the conversation. "I'm sorry, I have to go," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I'm late for something." She rushed towards the exit, leaving her drink half finished on the table. Coyote stood there completely bewildered by her reaction. Had he come across as threatening somehow? Was he that out of practice with talking to women? Over the following weeks, he found himself hoping to run into her again. He started frequenting the cafe at different times, hoping to catch her during her regular visits. When that didn't work, he tried other places around town, the bookstore, the library, the park where he took Evelyn to play. He finally saw her again at a supermarket in Maitama 2 weeks later. She was in the produce section, carefully selecting apples when he approached. "Tiwa," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and again he saw that flash of panic in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to bother you, I felt like we had a connection the other day, but then you ran off. Did I do something wrong?" For a moment she looked like she might run again, but then she seemed to steel herself, taking a deep breath. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said quietly. "It's complicated." "I'm good with complicated," he said, trying to keep his tone light. "I'm Coyote, by the way, Coyote Balagoon." The moment he said his full name, her face went completely white. "Oluwa'o," she whispered. You really don't remember me, do you?" "Remember you? Have we met before?" She looked around the supermarket, clearly distressed. "Not here, I can't. If you want to understand, meet me at Millennium Park tomorrow at 2 o'clock, by the big tree near the fountain." Before he could respond, she was gone again, abandoning her shopping cart and rushing towards the exit. Coyote spent the rest of that day and all the next morning wondering what he was walking into. Clearly Tiwa knew him from somewhere, but he couldn't place her. Had they gone to secondary school together? Had she been a client? Was she connected to the legal troubles with Simi? At exactly 2 o'clock, he found her sitting on a bench under the tree she'd mentioned. She was nervous, wringing her hands together. "Thank you for coming," she said as he sat down beside her. "Thank you for agreeing to explain. I've been going crazy trying to figure out how I know you." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the park where a few children were playing. Finally she spoke. "My name is Tiwa Adebayo. We went to the same secondary school together, though we didn't really know each other then. I was shy, quiet. You probably never noticed me." He searched his memory trying to place her, but came up empty. "After secondary school," she continued, "I went to Pali. You went away to university, but we both ended up back in Lagos after graduation. That's when we met. I still don't remember. It was at Jasmine's birthday party about 15 years ago. You were there with some friends from work, and I was there alone. I didn't know many people." A faint memory stirred. Jasmine's birthday party. He remembered the party, but not much about the specific people who'd been there. "We talked for about an hour that night," Tiwa said, her voice getting softer. "About books, about our dreams, about what we wanted to do with our lives. You told me about your plans to start your own business someday. I told you I wanted to work with children. Maybe become a teacher. Tiwa, I'm sorry, but I fell in love with you that night, she said simply. I know that sounds crazy. I know you can't fall in love with someone in one conversation, but I did. The admission hung in the air between them. You asked for my phone number before you left the party, she continued. You said you'd like to see me again. I gave it to you, and I spent the next week waiting for you to call. He was starting to get a sinking feeling about where the story was going, but he did not call her. 2 weeks later, I saw the announcement in the newspaper. You were engaged to Simi Johnson. The pieces were starting to come together, but he still didn't understand the full picture. Tiwa, I'm so sorry. I honestly don't remember getting your number, and I definitely don't remember deciding not to call you. If I had your number and didn't use it, there must have been a reason. There was a reason, she said, her voice becoming bitter. Simi made sure of it. What do you mean? 3 days after the party, Simi showed up at my apartment. I didn't even know she knew where I lived. She told me you'd asked her to come talk to me. His blood was starting to run cold. She said you felt bad about leading me on at the party, but that you were already in love with someone else. She said you were too kind to hurt my feelings directly, so you'd asked her to explain that you wouldn't be calling. Simi told you that. She was very convincing, very sympathetic. She said you were a wonderful man, but that you were already committed. Your heart to someone else. She made it sound like you were trying to be gentle with my feelings. Coyote felt sick. Even 15 years ago, Simi was manipulating situations to get what she wanted. But that wasn't all, Tiwa continued. 2 years later, after you were married, she approached me again. This time, she had a very different kind of proposition. What kind of proposition? Tiwa took a shaky breath. She said she needed a favor, a big favor. She said that she and her husband, Yu, were trying to have children, but that she was having medical issues with her eggs. The world seemed to stop spinning. She offered me 5 million naira to donate my eggs for an in vitro fertilization procedure. She said it would be completely anonymous, completely legal, and that I'd be helping a couple achieve their dream of having children. Oluwa, but it wasn't legal, was it? It wasn't done through proper medical channels, it wasn't anonymous, and it wasn't consensual in the way that mattered. What do you mean? She took me to a clinic that wasn't exactly legitimate. The doctor there didn't ask the right questions, didn't follow proper protocols. I thought I was donating eggs for anonymous in vitro fertilization. I had no idea she was planning to use them herself with her own husband's genetic material. The implications were hitting him like physical blows. Evelyn? Yes, Evelyn is my biological daughter, Coyote. I'm her birth mother. Coyote stood up from the bench, pacing away from her and then back again. Everything he thought he knew about his life, about his marriage, about his daughter was crumbling around him. But there's more, Tiwa said quietly. After the procedure was done, after Simi was pregnant, she came to see me one more time. What did she say? She told me that if I ever tried to contact you or the child, if I ever came near your family or tried to claim any parental rights, she would have me arrested for harassment. She said she had connections in the police force who would believe her over me. That's insane. That's criminal. But I didn't know that then. I was young, scared, and alone. I had no family to help me fight her. My parents had passed away in a car accident when I was 19. I had no siblings, no extended family who cared enough to get involved. I was completely on my own. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was more horrible than he could have imagined. She also told me something else, Tiwa continued. She said that if I caused any problems, anything happened to interfere with her happy family, she would make sure that something terrible happened to my mother. But you just said your mother passed away. She was talking about my foster mother, the woman who had taken care of me after my parents died, Mama Latoya. She was elderly, living alone in the village, and completely defenseless. Simi knew exactly who she was and where she lived. Coyote sat back down heavily on the bench. So you disappeared. I took the rest of the money she paid me and moved to another state. I got a job as a teaching assistant and tried to build a new life. But I never stopped thinking about the child I'd helped create. I never stopped wondering if she was healthy, if she was happy, if she looked like me, or like you. How long have you been back? 6 months. I moved back here around the same time you did. I heard through old friends that you'd gotten divorced, that there had been some kind of scandal with your wife. I thought maybe it would be safe to come home. But when you saw me at the cafe, I panicked. I'd spent so many years imagining what I might say to you if I ever saw you again. But when it actually happened, I ran. I was terrified that you'd recognize me, that you'd be angry about what had happened, or worse, that you wouldn't believe me. He reached over and took her hand. Tiwa, I am so sorry. I'm sorry for not remembering you from the party. I'm sorry Simi manipulated both of us. I'm sorry you went through all of that alone. She squeezed his hand, tears flowing freely now. There's something else you need to know. What? I wanted to have a DNA test done. I need to know for certain that Evelyn is my biological daughter. And if she is, I want to be part of her life, not as a replacement for the mother who raised her, but as someone who loves her and has always loved her. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of medical appointments, legal consultations, and emotional conversations with Evelyn. Coyote had to explain to his 10-year-old daughter that the woman she'd called her mother her entire life wasn't actually her biological parent, and that her real biological mother was someone who had been kept away from her through threats and manipulation. Evelyn took the news better than he expected. She was curious about Tiwa, asking dozens of questions about her and wanting to know what she was like. When he told her she was the woman from the cafe she'd seen him trying to talk to, she said, "She seemed nice and pretty. Can I meet her?" The DNA test results came back 3 weeks later, confirming what they all already knew in their hearts. Tiwa was indeed Evelyn's biological mother. But more than that, the medical records they obtained through legal channels revealed the full extent of Simi's deception. The clinic where the egg donation had taken place was indeed operating illegally. They had been shut down years ago for performing unauthorized procedures and failing to follow proper medical protocols. Simi had paid them to use Tiwa's eggs with Coyote's genetic material, but she'd had the resulting embryo implanted in her own womb. Legally and medically, she was the gestational mother, the woman who carried and gave birth to Evelyn. But genetically, Tiwa and Coyote were her biological parents. The legal implications were staggering. What Simi had done constituted fraud, theft of genetic material, and a dozen other crimes. But more than that, it meant that Tiwa had legal standing as Evelyn's biological mother. However, rather than pursuing a custody battle, Tiwa had a different idea. "I don't want to take her away from you. You're her father in every way that matters. You've raised her, loved her, been there for every important moment of her life. But you're her mother. I provided the genetic material. Yes, but I've missed 10 years of her life. I don't have the right to suddenly show up and demand to be her parent. Tiwa, you didn't miss those years by choice. They were stolen from you. I know, but that doesn't change the reality of what Evelyn needs now. She needs stability, consistency, and love. She's been through enough trauma with what happened with Simi. What she proposed instead was something beautiful and unconventional. She wanted to be part of Evelyn's life gradually, as someone she could get to know and hopefully come to love without the pressure of trying to replace the maternal figure she lost. I want to be her friend first, someone she can trust and rely on, and maybe if she's comfortable with it, we can explore what it means for me to be her biological mother as she gets older. But as Tiwa and Coyote spent more time together, something else began to develop between them. The connection he'd felt that first day in the cafe grew stronger with every conversation. She was intelligent, kind, thoughtful, and incredibly resilient. Despite everything she'd been through, she'd managed to build a successful career as a primary school teacher and maintained her capacity for love and trust. "I need you to know something," he told her one evening, as they walked through the park together. "What I'm feeling for you, it's not just because you're Evelyn's biological mother. It's not gratitude or some misplaced sense of obligation. What is it then? It's love, real genuine love, the kind I thought I felt for Simi, but now realize I never actually experienced." She stopped walking and turned to face him. Coyote, I've been in love with you for 15 years. Through all the pain, all the separation, all the fear, I never stopped loving you. But I need to know that you're not just trying to create some kind of ideal family situation. I'm not, I promise you I'm not. She studied his face in the lamplight. Then show me. He kissed her then, right there under the streetlight in the park, where she told him the truth about their daughter. It was nothing like the desperate, needy kisses he'd shared with Simi during their early relationship. This was deeper, more meaningful, full of promise and genuine affection. 6 months later, Coyote proposed to Tiwa on the anniversary of the day she'd told him the truth about Evelyn's parentage. Not because he felt obligated to create some nuclear family, but because he couldn't imagine his life without her in it. Evelyn was thrilled about their engagement. She'd grown to love Tiwa over the months they'd spent getting to know each other, and the idea of her becoming her stepmother and her biological mother felt natural and right to her. "Does this mean I can call her Mummy?" she asked him the night after he proposed. "That's something you'll have to discuss with her, but I think she'd be honored." Their wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family, with Evelyn serving as the chief bridesmaid. As Tiwa walked down the aisle in a simple but elegant lace dress, Coyote realized that this was what love was supposed to feel like. Not the desperate need to settle down that had driven his first marriage, but a genuine partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and deep affection. But their happiness was interrupted 6 months later by news that would rock their world once again. Inspector Adebayo called Coyote at work with an update on Simi's case. "Coyote, I need you to sit down for this. What's wrong?" "We've uncovered evidence of additional crimes committed by your ex-wife. Crimes that directly affect you and your daughter." "What kind of crimes?" "Identity theft, medical fraud, and conspiracy. It's related to the circumstances surrounding Evelyn's birth." His heart sank. "What did you find?" "We found records showing that Simi coerced Tiwa into the egg donation through threats and intimidation. She also forged medical documents to make the procedure appear legal when it wasn't. We already knew most of that, but we also found evidence that she was planning to sell information about the illegal procedure to other couples who were desperate for children. She was essentially running a black market fertility operation." The implications were staggering. Not only had Simi stolen his daughter's biological mother from her, she'd been planning to do the same thing to other families. "There's more," Inspector Adebayo continued. "We found correspondence between Simi and several other individuals who were involved in similar schemes. People who were threatening other young women into donating genetic material. Other women like Tiwa." "Exactly, and based on the evidence we've uncovered, the district attorney wants to file additional charges against Simi and everyone involved in the operation." The new charges meant that Simi's sentence would likely be extended significantly, but more importantly, it meant that other victims would finally get justice. Tiwa took the news surprisingly well. "I'm glad they caught her," she said. "If there are other women out there who went through what I did, they deserve to know the truth and get their children back." "Are you okay with testifying again?" "I'm okay with whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." The trial lasted 3 months. Tiwa's testimony was powerful and heartbreaking, detailing not just what happened to her, but the years of fear and isolation that had followed. Other victims came forward with similar stories, creating a picture of a systematic operation designed to exploit vulnerable young women. Simi was ultimately sentenced to 15 years in prison. Kola, who had been involved in the documentation and financial aspects of the fertility fraud, received 12 years, but the most satisfying moment of the entire trial came when Simi was given the opportunity to make a statement before sentencing. "My lord," she said, standing in her prison uniform, "I want to apologize to my former husband and daughter for the pain I've caused them." It sounded like a prepared statement, lacking any real emotion or genuine remorse. "I made mistakes and I'm willing to pay for them, but I want everyone to know that everything I did was motivated by my love for my family and my desire to give them the best life possible." Even from the gallery, Coyote could see the judge's skeptical expression. "Mrs. Johnson," the judge said, reviewing his notes, The evidence presented in this case shows a pattern of manipulation, fraud, and callous disregard for the well-being of others, including the child you claim to have been protecting. Your actions resulted in a young woman being separated from her biological child for 10 years and multiple other families being torn apart by your fraudulent schemes. He paused, adjusting his glasses. You have shown no genuine remorse for the suffering you have caused, and you continue to present yourself as a victim rather than taking responsibility for your choices. This court sentences you to 15 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years. As the wardens led Simi away, she looked back at Coyote one more time. But instead of the calculating look he'd seen the night of his business launch party, her expression was one of defeat and desperation. 2 years later, Tiwa and Coyote welcomed their first child together, a daughter they named Femi. Watching Tiwa hold their newborn daughter, seeing the joy and love in her eyes, he was struck by the contrast with his memories of Evelyn's birth. With Evelyn, Simi had seemed focused on the performance of being a mother rather than the reality of it. She'd been more concerned with getting the perfect photos for Instagram than actually bonding with the baby. But Tiwa's love for Femi was immediate, natural, and genuine. She was the mother he'd always hoped Simi would become, but never did. Evelyn, now 12, was thrilled to have a little sister. She had adapted beautifully to calling Tiwa mummy, and their relationship had developed into something beautiful and authentic. "She's so small," she said carefully, holding Femi for the first time. "Was I this small when I was born?" "Even smaller," Tiwa told her, stroking her hair. "You were the most beautiful baby I'd ever seen, even though I only got to see pictures of you for so many years." "I'm glad you're here now," Evelyn said simply. "I'm glad we found each other." 18 months later, they welcomed their son, Dayo, and 2 years after that, their youngest daughter, Temi. Their house was full of laughter, chaos, and the kind of genuine love Coyote never experienced during his marriage to Simi. Tiwa threw herself into motherhood with the same dedication she brought to everything in her life. But she also pursued her professional dreams, eventually leaving her teaching position to start her own educational consulting business. "I want to help other children who are struggling," she told him. "Kids who feel lost or forgotten the way I felt for so many years." Her business, Tiwa Educational Solutions, became incredibly successful. She specialized in working with children from difficult family situations, helping them navigate educational challenges while dealing with trauma and instability at home. But Tiwa's real passion project was her charitable work. Every year she organized massive donation drives for orphanages throughout the state, providing everything from clothing and toys to educational supplies and scholarships for aging-out foster children. "I know what it feels like to be alone in the world," she explained when he asked her about her motivation. "If I can make sure that other children don't experience that same isolation, then something good will have come from what I went through." The donations weren't small gestures. They were talking about tens of millions of naira worth of supplies and services each year. Tiwa had built her business specifically to generate the revenue needed to fund these charitable efforts. "This is how I honor the years I lost with Evelyn, by making sure that other children don't lose the support and love they deserve." 5 years after Femi's birth, Coyote received a letter that surprised him. It was from his parents, who had remained distant since the scandal with Simi. "My dear son," the letter began, "we know we don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, but we want you to know how deeply we regret our role in pushing you toward marriage with Simi." The letter went on to explain that they'd been so focused on the social and financial advantages of a union between their families that they ignored whether Simi was actually right for him. "We see now how happy you are with Tiwa and your children," they wrote. "We see the man you have become, the father you are, and the love you've built with someone who truly deserves you. We're proud of you for following your heart instead of our expectations." The letter concluded with a request to meet their grandchildren and hopefully rebuild their relationship as a family. He discussed it with Tiwa, who encouraged him to give them a chance. "People can change," she said, "and Evelyn, Femi, Dayo, and Temi deserve to know their grandparents if that's possible." The reunion was awkward at first, but his parents made genuine efforts to connect with Tiwa and the children. Over time, they were able to rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. His father pulled him aside during one of their visits. "Son, I owe you an apology. We were so concerned with what looked good on paper that we forgot what actually matters. Tiwa is a remarkable woman, and you're lucky to have found each other." "We're lucky to have found each other again," he corrected him. "We were meant to be together 15 years ago, but circumstances got in the way." "Do you think you would have been ready for this kind of love back then?" He considered his question seriously. "Maybe not. Maybe I needed to go through everything with Simi to understand what real love actually looks like." 10 years have passed since that terrible night when his world fell apart at his business launch party. Coyote Consulting Solutions has grown into one of the most respected firms in the industry, with offices in 3 states and a reputation for integrity that was forged in the fire of that early scandal. Evelyn is now 22, a university graduate working as a software developer and engaged to a wonderful young woman named Zainab. She's grown into a thoughtful, ethical woman who treats people with kindness and respect. "I learned from watching you and Mummy handle everything that happened," she told him recently. "I learned that you can go through terrible things and still choose to be good people." Femi is 18 and heading to university in the fall with plans to study social work. She wants to follow in Tiwa's footsteps, helping children and families in crisis. Dio, now 16, is a gifted athlete and student who volunteers at the same orphanages his mother supports. Temi, 14, is showing signs of having inherited her mother's business acumen and her father's analytical mind. As Coyote recounts this story, Tiwa and he are preparing to celebrate their 15th wedding anniversary. She's in the kitchen making jollof rice, laughing at something Temi is telling her about school. Dio is helping Evelyn fix something in the garage. Femi is video calling her boyfriend from school. This is what a real family looks like. Not the performance he lived through with Simi, but the genuine love, support and connection that happens when people choose each other every day. But the story doesn't end there. Last month, Coyote received a call that brought everything full circle. "Mr. Balogun, this is Officer Williams from the State Parole Board. I'm calling to inform you that Simi Johnson has applied for early parole." His first instinct was to object, to fight to keep her incarcerated for the full term of her sentence. But when he discussed it with Tiwa, she had a different perspective. If she's genuinely changed, if she's learned from what she did, maybe it's time to let her try to rebuild her life. "After everything she did to you, to us, Coyote, holding on to anger and resentment only hurts us. It doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't make our lives better. If she's truly reformed, then good for her. If she hasn't, that's her choice to make." At the parole hearing, he was given the opportunity to make a statement. Both Tiwa and he chose to attend, not to oppose her release, but to speak about the impact of her crimes and their hopes for the future. "Simi Johnson's actions caused immeasurable pain to my family," he told the parole board. "She separated a mother from her child, defrauded investors, and ran criminal schemes that hurt multiple families." He paused, looking at Simi, who sat quietly in her prison uniform. "But we've also learned that healing doesn't come from seeking revenge. It comes from building something better from the pieces that are left behind. If Miss Johnson has truly changed, if she's learned from her mistakes and is committed to living an honest life, then we support her opportunity for parole." Simi was granted early release 6 months later. He heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved to another state and found work at a non-profit organization helping other women transitioning out of prison. She never tried to contact them, and they never tried to contact her. That chapter of their lives was closed, and they were all better for it. And so Coyote learned many lessons from this journey. Never give up on love. Real love isn't just about finding someone who fits into your life plans or meets your family's expectations. It's about finding someone who sees your heart, challenges you to be better, and chooses you every day. Tiwa and Coyote found each other twice. Once as young people who weren't ready for what they could become together, and again as adults who had learned what love actually means. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your relationship, don't ignore those feelings. He ignored so many red flags with Simi because he wanted to believe in the life they were building together. If he had trusted his instincts earlier, he might have saved them all a lot of pain. Children are resilient, but they need truth. Evelyn weathered the storm of learning about her true parentage and her mother's crimes because they were honest with her and gave her the support she needed to process difficult information. Children can handle truth better than they can handle lies and secrets. Forgiveness is for you, not for them. Forgiving Simi didn't mean excusing what she did or pretending it didn't matter. It meant choosing not to let her actions continue controlling their lives. Forgiveness freed them to build something beautiful from the ruins of what they had lost. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing in your life. If Simi had never betrayed him, he might never have found his way back to Tiwa. If they hadn't been forced to confront the truth about Evelyn's parentage, their daughter might never have known her biological mother. The pain was real, but so was the joy that came afterward. Today, as Kayode looks around at his family, Tiwa helping Temi with homework, Dio and his friends playing football in the driveway, Femi calling to tell them about her latest academic achievement, Evelyn and Zainab planning their wedding. He knows that every struggle was worth it to get to this moment. Love is worth fighting for, truth is worth pursuing, and sometimes the family you're meant to have isn't the one you start with, but the one you find along the way. This is the story of Kayode's betrayal, discovery, and finding his way home to the love that was always meant to be his.